Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Peaceful Growth. And my today's guest is Rich. Hey Rich,
Hey Neil, how's it going?
going good? So Rich, thank you for joining in today. And yeah, we have a lot of interesting things that I wanted to specifically ask you and discuss about it. So how about we start with your introduction? Do you mind telling where are you from, what do you do, or anything that you would like to add there?
Sure. So I'm originally from New Jersey. About almost 20 years ago, I think I moved to Colorado and started Secret Stache, which is a on-demand web development agency that partners with creative agencies. We essentially help creative agencies who either don't have full-time development staff or need help in specific technology stacks. We help them build websites for their clients.
And tell us about the name of your company. How did you came to this name?
Yeah, it's it turns out that a lot of people would probably feel the same way, but Secret Stache had there was no motive behind it. It's interesting because living in Colorado, oftentimes people think that maybe it has to do with a powder stash, skiing, or a weed stash because marijuana is legal here, right?
Yeah.
But it's neither of those things. I just years and years and years ago would spend money on domains, and at the time when I moved out to Colorado, one of the girls who I was living with, one of my roommates, she was infatuated with mustaches, and it was mustache this, mustache that. And so Secret Stache just came to me. The domain was available. I bought it. And then when it came to deciding what the business name would be, I just looked through my domains and that was the one I picked. Of course, now there is some context that was unintended, but for instance, it is nice that there's some innuendo there because we're sort of a kooky brand, but also we are a creative agency, Secret Stache, in a lot of ways. So it has evolved into context, but it wasn't intentional.
Yeah, and I think it goes really well with the like when we go to your website, we can see the vibe that you are presenting on your website. I think it goes really well with that message.
Yeah, one of the things that we did when we rebranded it in 2021, end of 2020, 2021. We received the EIDL Disaster Relief Fund, and by the time we received the money, we didn't really need it to survive anymore. So we used it for marketing purposes, and we had enough to go through a rebrand. And that was the goal. We wanted to be this lighthearted, goofy company that focused on things that were contrary to what you would normally see in the corporate world. So it sets the vibe for the type of work you're going to get with us, or the type of attitude you're going to get working with us, right? And so in a lot of ways it can be a filter for people who think we're unprofessional, right? That they'll see the brand, they'll see sort of the messaging, and they'll realize that we're not a good fit, right? And so that's nice to have. And then also a lot of times people, it's a warm, I don't know, I would really even think about it, but it's an easy company, right? We're not hard to talk to, and that's worked out pretty well too, I think.
Yeah. Great. How big is your team, Rich?
So we have our development team is in Ukraine. We are at 9. We hired a 9th last week, and we are recruiting another. So we'll have 10 probably by the end of October. And then in the US, we have myself and one other full-time client-facing manager and 2 part-time managers. So what is that? That's 13, and we'll probably be 14 by the end of October.
And how long ago did you start this business?
Technically, we've been around since 2006.
Okay.
But I didn't make enough money, and that was at that time. That was really just a side hustle. It became, the revenue got to a point where I could, justify making it my full-time income. It wasn't a true business in the sense that it had, employees and things like that until I think 2012. So it was like 6 years of freelance before making that transition into the investment that's required, for these types of things to grow.
Yeah. And how do you define or measure the growth of your business? Through revenue, number of clients? Like, if there is anything that you want to share there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to answer. Revenue is the hardest thing to predict. So I tend to, try to measure at least success, of a goal based on things that are a little bit more in my court, so how many leads did I speak with, or, how many conversations, how many opportunities did we bid on, and things like that. We do try to get 25% year-over-year growth. That's a goal. So, you can reverse engineer that a little bit. Okay, well, if our conversion rate is this, and we have to talk to this many leads for that, like how many leads do I have to talk to?
Have you been meeting this goal, 25% growth rate year over year, or like?
We started actually with that deliberately in 2021. 2022, we had 75% growth.
Oh, nice.
This year, we're probably flat.
Okay.
From last year. Last year, I think, might have been more of an outlier than true growth. But if you look at our 10-year plan, we're still on track, a little bit ahead. But, I made the mistake last year or at the end of last year, budgeting this year based off of last year's growth and not maybe normalizing a couple years. So I won't make the mistake again, because, we're doing okay because we are very, very conservative with our savings. But, right now we're catching up. We're about 10% behind where we should be, but we're about 75% above where we should be in expenses. So the two of those things combined is kind of, it would otherwise be scary, but we've saved so much money, and we'll still be profitable. It's going to be single-digit profit this year, probably.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Talking about the flat growth rate this year, I just wanted to mention something. And I went to WordCamp US this year, 3 months ago, in Maryland, and during the WordCamp US, I talked to a couple of other agency owners. Like, they are maybe not just WordPress; they might also be in the digital services offering. But that was kind of like a common theme that I heard again and again from the other entrepreneurs and agency owners, that their growth rate this year has been either slow or the same as the last year. So I think it looks like maybe not just your agency, but pretty much a lot of other agencies that I've been talking to.
And that would make sense, because our work comes from agencies. So we don't have any work with end clients. So if they're not getting the work, we're not getting the work. So
makes sense.
We're sort of at the mercy there. It's probably like our least defensible area, is that if the agency world has issues, we have issues.
Yeah. So I have two questions on that. The first one is, you mentioned that from 2006 until 2012, it was a side hustle, and then you went full time from 2012. So between 2006 and 2012, for that, I think 6 years of time, if you can tell a little bit about that, what motivated you to go full time, or how was that phase for you in the beginning of the business?
Yeah. So when I moved to Colorado, I didn't move for a career. In fact, I left a career to be a ski bum, really. I moved to snowboard. It was my prime objective was just to go snowboard, figure things out, and then come back 6 months later. And it was just happenstance that I stayed. I had signed a 12-month lease, and I became very close with one of my roommates, and I didn't want to leave them hanging. So I said, okay, I'll just stay the summer too, and then I'll leave. But then once you experience Colorado in the summer, especially in the mountains, it's very, very hard to leave, because there's a saying that a lot of people will talk about. It's, everyone comes to Colorado for the mountains in the wintertime, but they stay for the mountains in the summertime. And it's absolutely true. It's beautiful. The weather is unreal. It could be 95 degrees, but there's very little humidity. So if you find shade, it's 65 degrees. It's just one of those places where it's hard to experience any other way than being there, And so I stayed for that year. And then I can't remember exactly what kept me there, but I had so much fun that I was like, okay, I'll do it one more year. And I think it was a couple years. I'm going to do it one more year. Going to do it one more year. But I had built a website. I didn't know what I was doing. I sort of just hacked together a WordPress website that focused on the local snowboarding. And it got real popular. This is like very, very early days of social media. This is a year or two after Facebook actually allowed people who weren't in college to register. It's not, it's dating us back there. There's no Instagram, there's no TikTok or any of these more, real-time media platforms. And so it just so happened that we were there at the very beginning. And so we exploded. We got really big really quickly. And as a result of that, I had opportunities to build other small business websites because, it's a small mountain town. There are not many people who understand tech. So I was the one tech guy, so I was, moonlighting in that sense with web design. But what my real income was really from working in a restaurant, and then in the off seasons, whatever odd jobs I could pick up, landscaping, worked catering, pretty much anything, And so the nice thing about it was that I was 26 and had roommates. I'm not sure if that's unusual or not, but in a mountain town, it's not unusual. Mountain town, no age to having roommates because it's so expensive to live there,
Yeah.
But with roommates, my nut monthly was very, very little. I think I paid like $600 in rent. Didn't have a lot of disposable income. So, cooked every night and, you make it work. So it didn't take much for me to realize that, I wish I had journaled the amount of money that I was forecasting for whatever year it was that I decided I wasn't going to go back to the restaurant, that I was going to give this a full-time shot, but I didn't. But I would be surprised if it was any more than $30,000 gross, because as a freelancer, gross is your revenue, right? Like you're not really investing in tech, you're not investing in outsourcing and any of that. So it might have been 30 grand. I don't know. Today, it seems like that's the minimum I could have gone for, but who knows? Back then, maybe it was less. And that was basically that was it at the time. I didn't have any larger goals. In my head, I'd always wanted to work for myself, and I'd always had these side hustles. So the moment that I was able to create financial independence, albeit very, very low level of independence, that was it. I didn't have any other goals. It was only until I felt stuck where I was in Vail that I realized that I wasn't going to grow anymore. It didn't matter like what I did with the business. I personally wasn't going to be able to grow in that area just because there weren't enough people who were doing the things that I was doing. And moving to Denver was sort of like a chapter 2. Chapter 1 being, identifying that there was this thing that people were willing to pay for and that I could have that financial independence. And then moving to Denver was sort of like, okay, now like take it seriously. Like how far can you take this? But at that time, I don't know that I really had any intention of building a company. It was just that I wanted to build something for myself. And then, I'm not great at everything. And that's the problem, is that, you have to do front end development, you have to do back end development, you have to do sales and marketing, you have to do operations. And it's just too much for anyone to be good at anything. And so that's what I really ran into, is that I was very good at focusing, but as soon as I was pulled into many different directions, I couldn't get anything done. I couldn't get like the quality of work done that I wanted. So, Upwork or whatever it was called back then, it just made things easy. It was like perfect timing for someone like me because all the tools were there for us to build a team. And then, the fact that it's in Ukraine was sort of something that happened later down the road. At first, I didn't care where the developers were from. But the first developer I hired, Victoria, is still with the company. So it's pretty cool. She's been with the company for, I guess that would be almost 10 years now, probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also mentioned about your 10-year goals or plan. So do you want to talk a little bit more about it? Like what is your 10-year plan and goal? And yeah.
So the 10-year plan is like tongue in cheek, right? Because I think that having North Star goals that, if you say it to enough people, a good percentage of those people will roll their eyes at you, like those types of goals. The goals that are like, what are they called? The big, hairy, scary goals or whatever. I forget. There's like it's meant to be something that other people don't.
Yeah. I think it's big, hairy, audacious.
Yeah. Goal. Big, hairy, audacious goals. Yeah. I forget who it was that said that, but
It was Jim Collins from Good to Great.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And so uh, I think it's important to have those goals, but especially seeing how much of I've been doing a lot of reflection lately. And so like it's just, looking back at what happened.
Hmm.
If I look back and I narrate it, I can narrate it in such a way where it was deliberate, but none of it was deliberate. The only thing that was deliberate
Do
is
you
I
mind
was
sharing what that 10-year goal looked like so then we can connect a little bit more?
Well, it was really just a revenue goal, and
Okay.
in a revenue goal, the only reason why it was that number was because it sounded good.
Hmm.
And I was talking to a guy who does our ads, and he and I are around the same age, and we're businesses of the same size. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, my 10-year goal is 5 mil and chill,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I have no like requirements in my life to reach 5 million in revenue.
Okay.
And from where we are today, that would be a gigantic leap. It really would require,
Hmm.
unending 25% year-over-year growth.
Hmm.
It sounded cool. And so I was like, okay, that's it. That's the goal. But I like having a goal like that because it's there. But no, like our goals are always much more tight. Like this year, I want to do this because I think this is the right thing for the company.
Hmm.
And then I have no interest in getting to 5 million in revenue anymore. The size of the company that would be required is not the type of company I want to run. So that's why it's like in tongue in cheek. I don't care. What I want is by the end of next year to have a team in place that allows the business to run without me. Um, I don't have any qualification beyond that. I didn't
Hmm.
say run effectively,
Hmm.
right? I just want to know that the company can run
Hmm.
with me, and then effectively will come, right? Because right now there's too many things that have to happen, or I need to do in order for them to happen, and I never had the team, and now we have the team, and so it's a matter of just offloading all of those things that I keep in my head into processes and things like that. So you know, I don't know. Some people who, if you go to school for business, you probably are more likely to follow those types of structures. But I found that just being agile and giving yourself permission to change your mind as often as
Hmm.
you need to is more of the way that I seem to work anyway.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what's your inspiration for, like, what inspired you or what triggered you to focusing on making sure the business runs without you or with your minimal
Yeah. Well,
involvement?
there's the likelihood of a service company like mine being acquired is quite low.
Hmm.
Um, but those things that you know uh, a purchaser would expect to see in a business, they're the same things that are required in order for an owner to go on sabbatical,
Hmm.
right? Either way, like whether you
Yeah.
sell your business or not, for your business to be successful, it has to be able to run without you. You have to make sure that at some point you remove yourself from the list of assets.
Hmm.
And so to me, it's really just that. It has nothing to do with my interest in stepping away or even doing less work than I do. I love what I do, and so I wouldn't know what to fill my time with. And
Hmm.
so 40 hours a week, it's like, yeah, I'm still going to do 40 hours a week
Hmm.
probably, right?
Yeah.
But maybe I'll get to work on some other things that are more interesting. One of the best benefits of this journey is that you get really good at something and then you hand it off.
Hmm.
You get really good at something and then you hand it off. And you get really good at something and you hand it off. So it's like you get to be a beginner and then
Hmm.
an expert. And then as soon as you get to a point where you think that there's diminishing returns for the business for you to do anymore, you find somebody else to do it. I think that's the one lesson that I had to learn. Like, and I made the mistake more often, is that you probably should never ever let yourself get so good at that thing that you're doing
Hmm.
that the cost to replace you is more than you can afford. You should
Hmm.
always figure out like okay, get to a point where it's like I am worth $25 an hour in this job, and then because I can afford, say that's all you can afford, then
Yeah.
now you can afford $25. Don't get to a point where you're like I'm a $200 an hour employee, because like now you got to hire a $200 employee to replace you. So it's like,
Right.
and if you think about what the business would benefit from some number to 200, everything in between is diminishing returns. Nobody notices the difference, right?
Hmm.
But the expert.
Hmm.
So there's like a level there, and I think that's something you have to define for yourself. But like as you start to do these things, it's like, okay, I'm really good at this. It's like, but $25 good, I'm $50 good, I'm $100 good. Now I catch myself every now and again. How good am I? If I were to have to hire someone to replace me, what would it cost me? And if I say to myself, "Oh, I can't afford that," it's like, okay, well, you know what I mean? Like there's something that's misaligned. You need to figure out how to fix that. And so that's sort of what is interesting to me now is I've offloaded development on the front end and the back end, and I've offloaded account management. That was a big thing for last year, and now I'm offloading the general project management. The last and the hardest thing, because I am too good at it, is the technical project management. So in order to hire someone like me, they would take up too much of our revenue.
Yeah.
So I have to hire a junior. But when you hire a junior, you can't replace yourself. You basically just now have somebody to do, some of the work, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with that. But to answer your question more specifically, people, I always tell people like what I do is really fulfilling. And I love what I do, and people mistake what I mean by that because like, well, how could you be fulfilled by building websites? And usually you're talking to people who don't work for themselves, so they don't quite understand that what we do has nothing to do with the fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
You could say that in chapter 1, fulfillment was just having that financial independence. That's it. I'm fulfilled because I get to be my own boss. And then you need more, and so you say, okay, well, what's the next thing? Well, I got fulfillment in trying to build a team because I'd never done that before. I have no experience doing that. That was really fun. And so moving into the next chapter, like, what is it going to be? I think it's like, I want to build a company that the clients would never want to stop working. We're so good that we're so good that you couldn't imagine a professional career. Like, I don't know how to say this yet because I'm still thinking about it, but it's along the lines of for their entire professional career, they wouldn't want to work with anybody else, right? That's a goal. It's like, how do you build a company that the clients would actually believe that to be true? And the more I thought about that, I was like, well, that's only half of it. The other half is I want to build a company where your employees wouldn't want to work with anyone else for their professional career. Not to say that they won't leave, but that you build a company that they wouldn't have to leave. That it gives them growth, it gives them fulfillment, it gives them autonomy, it pays them well. It does all the things that they'd be seeking elsewhere because you couldn't provide it. And so that's the motivation now, because that's a huge endeavor. And how do you do it? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. And I think it's a work in progress. But I think that if you and a lot of times I have to let these things sit for a minute. Do I really want this? Do I really want this? And at some point I'll say, okay, this is it. This is locked in. Now it's like reverse engineer that. Practically, what does that look like? What are the things that have to be true? And usually the first thing is with the client side is you can't ever stop with getting better and same price releasing more value, right? So that like you every time, because we're not cheap. We're probably among the the more expensive services with regard to website development. So every time when they see our invoices, they have to be thinking, well, could we get this cheaper, right? And so just keep hitting them with all the value that we add that nobody else can really offer. And then on the employee side, it's it's pretty simple. I have to pay myself less and just build the company, right? Which you're starting to read about with the auto worker union on strike and things like that, where the one CEO is like 300x the median salary or 100x the median salary. Solvable problem. And like, it's probably true that you should never be that much ahead of your employees, and especially at a company like ours. It's like, so it's like, well, that's it. It's like, like, have a deliberate profit margin that you want to hit, and everything above that goes back into the company, whether it be for education or for the employee salaries or bonuses, and just make sure that you manufacture it that way. Big endeavors, right?
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that, Rich. And I think there are a lot of interesting things that you mentioned, but specifically, I like your goal of that, how, and especially the question that you are asking, that how what can I do to have the clients works with you and your employees stays with you. And I think that's really good way to kind of think about, solving that problem. Because when I started Multidots in 2009, I kind of like had the very similar, thought process. And I was like, because I didn't have any business experience. I have a like engineering background. I've been developer and I know how to build websites and stuff like that. But running a business is something has never actually occurred to me. I mean, in the sense like it was something that I don't have an experience or expertise or a background in. But there was only one thing that actually helped me in that moment, which was the same thing. I was like, any business has these three different things, that as an entrepreneur, that if I can take care of that, then I have a business. And one of them was client. Then we have your team members, and then you have the company itself. So these three entity, and it's alignment between these three. So the way I see the alignment is like, as an entrepreneur, which one I should focus on more. So, and that's alignment is like, should I focus more on the client? Should I more focus on the company and organization and stuff like that? Or I should focus more on my team? And one thing at that moment, my decision was to focus on only one, because if I try to focus on all three, probably I will not be able to do, the balance in a way. So I started focusing on my team. And the way I see it, like, especially in the service industry, I'm not the one who's talking to the client every day. It's my team who are actually delivering an experience, especially in the service industry. I think we need to be a people first company. That's what I kind of like figured out that time. If you are a product company, like if you have like a product or SaaS business, then you should be a product first, but if you are into consumer, not consumer, but like commodities, then you should be a price first company. So like focusing on the price more than anything else, if you are into commodities, because that's where the price, whoever has the cheaper price wins. But especially in the service, what I've learned is that you need to be a people first company, because if your people, your team member, if they take good care of your client, then your clients are happy, and if clients are happy, they will take care of your company by paying you, and making sure that your revenue and growth and profit, all of those are maintained. And if company is like healthy, financially, then in a way, the company will take care of the people, like, by paying them well and making sure that they stay with you. So that's where I kind of like started the circle. Like if I focus on the team will focus on the client will help grow the company, and company will continue to focus and invest and grow the people.
Yeah, that's very similar to what's happening for us. We're fortunate to have the number 2 in the company. Alex is in Kyiv, Ukraine, and he focuses on the development team. So the product, if there is one, right, the frameworks that we build and stuff like that, that's in his hands now, and so I can trust him to just handle it. So I only really have to worry about the two things now. I have to worry about operations and the business, and then the US based team.
Yeah.
And there's also this concern that I have that, are we going to fragment culture because there's a clear divide between the client-facing team that's here in the US and the development product deliverable team that's in the Ukraine? And yeah, the answer is yeah. Like it will fragment if we're not careful. But it's one of those problems that I'm aware of, but it still gets pushed on the list because you can't solve every problem at once. I'm also very cyclical in the sense that I like to say, what is this year's focus, right? So
yeah,
this year's focus was the US based team. And so like, as we move out of, into the last quarter and out of this year, what'll be the next year? I think next year's focus will be to scale. And so, it'll be more about process, operations, sales, and so then the year after that will be like, oh, I want to work on product again. And so, and that's the other thing that I really love is that I get to make these decisions, and, they may not be the decisions that a mentor or a business coach would want me to have necessarily. Right.
Yeah.
But it's my decision. And I always have, the coaches and the mastermind groups there to make sure that I'm not, leading too naively. But at the end of the day, like the naivety is what got me here in the first place. This belief that I can take on big challenges without any experience. And I don't really want to lose that because it's the fun part.
Yeah.
I think there's, for the for a long period of my life, I risked my body. Like snowboarding, I have, plates in my arm. I've had more concussions than pro football players. In a lot of ways, I've made some bad decisions and took risks that weren't worth it, but it's part of it, right? Is like, that's what the excitement is. And now I'm very careful with my body, and the risks that I take are more financial. They're bets on, things that you can't, like tech bets, which, I mean, like these days it's like, you're almost always going to make a mistake there.
Yeah.
But that's the fun part. And to like remove that would make me feel like I just bought myself a business, or I bought myself a job, I think is what they say, right? It's like, it doesn't feel like entrepreneurship. It feels like a job. And then it doesn't matter if I'm the only, stakeholder. It still doesn't sound as fun. So I don't know. I'm always balancing between that.
Okay guys, so if you're interested to check out how Multicollab works and how Multicollab can solve your problems or improve your content publishing workflow, you can go to our website and click on the Try Demo tab in the menu section. Then simply fill out your details and there you go. Now you have access to the demo environment where you can test all the amazing features that Multicollab has to offer.
So let's talk a little bit about the culture and the values, because the goal that you mentioned about how you can keep, your employees and clients forever with the company, so that I think the culture, and the values, that culture values through the experience, how both our team members and our clients experience. So culture and value plays a big role there. And we kind of like talked about that few weeks ago when we got connected. So do you want to talk about that? Like, how do you see the value and the culture in this goal?
Yeah, this is a big one too, right? Like, as an anecdote, I always like to start this conversation with kind of like a thought exercise. A lot of people will say, as entrepreneurs, if I could just clone myself, right? If I could just clone myself, I could get all these things done. And it's an interesting thing to say because it's ridiculous. But what I think might be more true is that you're not necessarily trying to clone yourself. You're trying to clone someone with the same values. Right? And obviously this is an anecdote, right? And what I mean by that is, like, you're not looking for yourself. You're looking for someone who thinks like you, who acts like you, who behaves like you. And so I think when it comes to culture, when it's, this is with, your personal life or your business life, I think it looks different, meaning that it's multicultural, it's multi-gender, it's all of those things, but it thinks the same, right? So it's like a lot of those things tend to coincide, like your actual culture, right? Your upbringing, a lot of times that does reflect your values and core values, but not always, right? And so what I look for in interviewing has nothing to do with experience. It has, you just feed in these questions, like, which of the following, is more important to you? And I just put in my core values. And like, the more likely that you say the things that I would say, the more likely, like, I'm going to want to work with you, because most of the time the work that we're trying to hire for is teachable. Yeah. Right. It's all teachable. And I've learned that, a small business really can only afford to hire junior people. When you start to hire senior people, the worst possible thing that you could have is a really good person with opinions, right? I'm not looking for opinions. I'm looking for people to actually follow a set of instructions that I've defined based on nuance that you don't know. So even though you're very, very intelligent, you don't know the nuance that I know. And there are reasons why I think they're done this way. So usually the more junior, the less likely you run into that. Well, if that's the case, right? Well, then all you need is somebody who, would walk the same path that you would. So for us, those values, well, at least for me, the number one core value is lifelong learning, right? And so if you see that manifested in our company, you'll see that we never actually look at our product, like the framework, the websites that we build, as done. There's always something that we can improve on. And so there's a mentality in our culture that every single time we finish a project, we think through the retrospective, right? Like what went really well, what could we have improved on? And we really focus on those things that we can improve on. I think lifelong learning is an easy one, but I don't know that everyone would put it at the top, right? The other thing that's interesting about having values and manifesting them through your company is that you can't just say that your core value is lifelong learning and then that's it. You put it on the wall or something, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're implementing, it'll probably be like out and about in 2024, is if I believe that lifelong learning is important, I should incentivize everyone in our team who acts on that. But we shouldn't limit what that means, meaning that lifelong learning does not just mean you do something to improve yourself or Secret Stache. It's you improve yourself. Because in my opinion, it doesn't matter what it is. If you are continually looking to improve yourself, we benefit from that indirectly, but also probably directly.
Yeah.
So if you want to go and get your yoga teacher certification, we'll incentivize you for that. And what does that look like? I don't know. You know, it could be anything. It doesn't matter. You know, it could be straight up cash. It could be an extra day or two off. It could be, you know, paid vacation. Depending on how complicated it is to succeed, right? It would be tiered. And so some of them, you know, would be things that are, you know, directly related to their career. So if it's a developer, maybe it's a developer course, or, you know, if somebody's looking to get healthy, it's like, okay, well, if you do this, like, you know, 60-day, you know, hell week or whatever they do, like, you know,
Yeah.
or if, and all you gotta do is just show that you completed it, and that is succeeding, right? And so things like that are really important. But the core values is a, you know, we talked about, like, there's exercises that you do to find your core values.
I was going to ask that question, like, how do you, like, a lot of entrepreneurs and even individuals, you know, we all kind of like get that, like, you know, the values are important, but people also struggle finding those values because, yeah, like realizing that what are my core values as an individual, or what are the core values of the company, it's kind of like challenging. So what kind of like was your process to find your core values?
So I was introduced to an exercise years and years, probably 20 years ago, back in Vail. I was a member of the Vail Leadership Institute. This is in the Vail Valley, Colorado. And it was a really cool, out of nowhere, just like right in the middle of mountains, this organization that focused on building leaders for the local community. And I was in a really eclectic group. It was, you know, an executive for Beaver Creek Mountain, the runner-up to Top Chef, the original Top Chef, you know, a woman who owned an accounting firm. You know, just it was all over the place. I was the only person who did tech. I had no business being in the same room with them as a freelancer, but you know, I built the website for the company, and they were like forced to put me in. But anyway, we went on a retreat, and it's just a deck of cards, and you can actually get the deck. So the deck of cards that I use is different from what you would get on Amazon. But if you just go to Amazon, you say values cards, you know, it's a deck of cards, 52 cards, right? 27 cards are usually head values. 27 cards are usually heart values. A head value would be like intelligence, if that's important. A heart value would be love, right? It's very obvious. And the exercise is, through a series of rounds, you narrow down those cards to the things that stand out to you, right? So the first thing to do is path. Yes, no, right? So this appeals to me in any way, or it doesn't. And you just go through all of them that way, and then you move the ones that you said no out of the way all together, and then you compile the next one, and you try to go half of that. And, you know, you go through 3, 4, 5 rounds of it, and the first couple rounds are simple, and then the rounds get harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
And eventually you get down to a point where you're hopefully getting to like no more than 5, ideally 3. And the reason that I was told is that any more than 3 is really hard to actually live a life guided by those things. And this is something where you sort of like your personality will define how this works. I don't have the ability to differentiate between my personal life and my entrepreneurial life. So they're the same core values, right? But
what are those 3 values? Do you mind sharing that?
Yep. It's lifelong learning, community, and resilience.
Okay.
Yeah. And usually you know, like when you ask somebody, hey, do you know what your core values are? And they're like, oh yeah. And then you're like, okay, what are they? And then they go into like a narrative. They don't know what their core values are. Right. And so the whole point of this is that you want to have a word or a phrase, right? Like lifelong learning. And then there's an explanation behind it. Right. And so lifelong learning is it's the one thing that has stayed constant throughout my entire life, is that like I've always been drawn and curious in an insatiable way. So even today, you know, I remember when the lockdowns happened, I watched every single DIY video on YouTube that probably existed at the time, right? And it didn't matter what it was. If I'm watching an expert do what they're an expert at, that is perfect entertainment for me, right?
Yeah.
So it's just consuming these things, you know, or, you know, like I'll go through phases of reading a book a week, and, you know, and, you know, of course I have to go through cycles of it because I get bored of one thing and then go to another. But
yeah,
so that's what lifelong learning is. It's like, it doesn't really matter what I'm learning. I have to be in that sense. But practically, when it meant snowboarding, I was the guy who would hike a feature in the terrain park for 6 hours. And then, you know, eventually people would see me doing it and they would join me. And the next thing you know, there's like a crew of 20 people just working on the same trick over and over and over and over again, like putting in the work, repetition, right? And that's the resilience. It's like getting knocked over, getting back up, getting knocked over, getting back up. And then all of a sudden getting to a point where it's flawless, right? So with, you know, the business, it's the same thing, right? It's, you know, figure out what the problem is, fail, figure it out. Now all of a sudden you're better than everybody, right? And it just so happens that the only difference between the best and everyone else is failing forward, right? It's just that resilience. And then community is very specific to subcultures. So I, like, when I say community, I don't mean like I care that I'm in Denver and Denver is my community. I'm not involved in politics. That's not what I mean. What I mean is the snowboard community when that was important in my life, the skateboard community when that was important in my life, the entrepreneur community now, the tech community now. So like I get really involved, right? And so even the way that you and I were introduced was through a member, Robbie, from the WordPress community. You know, we know each other because we both got very, very immersed in the WordPress community, and we've been in the community for very, very long time. I mean, we're like the grandfathers of it at this point, right?
Yeah.
But it's like the conferences that I go to, it's not just good enough to go to them. I have to become friends with the people who organize them, right? It's like, it's that type of stuff. I can't just be an attendee. I have to be a participant in some way.
Yeah.
So those are the three things. Now, if I had to add 5, I haven't thought about it. Inclusion is 1. So diversity, inclusion would be 4 or 5. And then there was one other, at one point it was ambition. I've removed ambition because ambition can be a dirty word too. And, when I didn't have success, it was important. Now that I've felt like the only person who can define success for you is yourself. And so I've already defined that. In fact, the moment that I was, you know, financially independent, that was it for me. You couldn't tell me I wasn't successful at that point. Didn't matter, right? Making 35 grand a year had nothing to do with my success in my head, you know? But now that I actually have passed that, I don't see ambition as like the right thing. And that's actually an interesting thing about the values exercise, is that it's not always going to be the case that this is like set in stone.
Right.
Like I remember a guy who was not in my group in the Leadership Institute, but was like, you know, part of one of the groups, and we were friends, and he had said that he had just had a kid. And so when he did the next time after having a kid, or it was right before, he did the exercise and he put money there.
Okay.
And he's not a greedy person. Like, no, I need money. Like I can't keep playing around. Like I need to earn money because now I have this dependent, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it too, is as you do these things, you are trying to get to the heart of it. And a lot of these things will not change, but you're allowed to change them. And so you do the exercise, right? You throw it all together, and then you sort of put it aside, and then you keep doing it.
Yeah.
See, like, is it consistent? Because one of the phenomenons of this exercise is that the first time you do it, especially if you do it in a group, you don't necessarily pick the truth. You pick the thing that you project. I want this person.
Yeah.
And I think that's the dangerous part, is that you're not really supposed to like pick things that you want to become. You're trying to find the core things that are like deep inside you.
Who you are. Yeah.
right? Because one, if you're in a mastermind group and you know somebody else's core values, you also know how to react. Like you'll know, like, so a lot of people, like the group I was in was a religious organization that founded it. So most people were devout Christians, and I was sort of an outlier in that sense. But like I recognized that I had to respond in a very certain way because their core values were not aligned in the same way mine were. But I knew what their were. It was my responsibility, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way. But also because if you know your peers' core values, you can tell them when they're going misaligned. Hey, what you're saying is in contrast with one of your core values, right?
Yeah.
And so think about like a leadership team in the same company understanding this about each other. You can navigate those complex, crucial conversations that are so hard to have normally. You can navigate them easier. And you can also see when they're going awry, and you can try to put them, hey, look, like, no offense, but what you're doing is starting to look like it's going against what you say is core to you. And I think that, it helps the conversations, get back on track or never get off track to begin with.
Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned about in order to finding your values, so one thing I wanted to mention there is that when it comes to the values, a lot of time, like one thing is like we feel like, I need to create the values. Actually, one big realization for me was that our core values, they already lies into our daily actions and choices and the routine that we maintain. So it's already there. You just have to discover it. It's not something that you have to pick up a fancy word to describe, who you want to be or who you are. Yeah. But it's more like, the exercise actually that I followed to find my core values. I'll actually share what are my core values, as we are on the topic of the core values. So my core values are growth, peace, and spirituality. So I call it GPS, so that's my GPS, like growth, peace, and spirituality. And I didn't know, and I just found out, I discovered them last year when I was in a workshop, and we went through kind of like a similar exercise about like what are those values that resonate with you, that you feel inspired about. And I think I had like 15-20 words, and then we cut it to 10, and then cut it to 5, and then cut it to 3, and the growth, peace, and spirituality, GPS, that came out. And when I write it down on a piece of paper, and I was like, wow, I found my core values. And 1 week later, I looked at my tattoo. So I had this tattoo in 2009, and I tattooed growth, peace, and spirituality here. And before even like doing this exercise, so that's what I kind of like realized, that your core values has been with me for like 11, 12 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that.
I think that it's one of those things where I feel like there's probably no harm in doing it when you're young, because I think that anytime you start to use these types of thought exercises, there's always going to be positive benefit. But having done it for the first time as an adult was nice, because I feel like I was at a point where I was willing to actually be honest with myself. So it's like, you just had to take the opportunity to be honest, but you knew it the whole time. It was always there.
Yeah. And that's kind of like something I noticed, that like one, just look into the daily actions and the decisions that we make. I think that is already a core values there, because that kind of like knowingly or unknowingly, it is already guiding you to pick the path. Because a lot of time we feel like, what kind of people we like, what kind of work we like, what kind of websites and the books we read, it kind of already tells you, your core values. But most important, I think, before I share, I wanted to ask you that knowing your core value, how it helped or shaped your life and your business.
It's like just a tool. I'm not like into a lot of the foo-foo stuff. Trust falls make me want to like kill myself. But like, this is the one thing where I felt like really, really connected to it. But it's just a tool. And so like, I think of it as like, if I get to a point where I have to make a very, very difficult decision and I'm like weighing the options, I just try to weigh those options. Like, how do these align, or are they misaligned to the core values? Because if we can't figure out what to do, that could be a tiebreaker. it's hard to like actually like practically like, oh, this is a time that I use my core values, right? Like those are things that I always am like, I don't know that you ever really will have that definition like that example, but I do see it as like a tool. I want, well, for instance, okay, so when we decided that I wanted to have core values in the company, to me it was like, well, I don't want to just have a mission statement and that's it, because I know Enron had a great mission statement, right? And they were a terrible company. So just having a mission statement doesn't really do anything. So it's like, well, okay, well, if you say that lifelong learning is important, how does that manifest in the company? And so it was almost like I started with, okay, I said that our core value was this. Well, just saying that isn't enough. What would the company have to do in order for it to be manifested in the company? And that's where we came up with this, like, what we call it a bounty program, where it's like, if you do these things, and these things are all meant to improve your life, either your professional career or your personal life, then we will, as a company, incentivize you. So that would be one.
I love that.
With regard to community, I'm always, like I said, I'm deeply involved in everything I do. There's no surface level things with me. I just don't, I can't do it. So like I said, it's like, when I get involved in communities, I get deeply involved in communities. I don't just, it's like, I try to find all the people in WordPress who have helped me and, connect with them in some way on a more personal level. And, now that I'm older, it's like, I would do the same in reverse and just, mentor anyone who was trying to figure that out. But in resilience, that's an easy one, right? It's just, get up, try again, don't quit. I was just the other day thinking about the only commonality that I've found in all the people who are successful as entrepreneurs is just that they just lasted. They just made it. And so a lot of times it's like you have to structure your life around, what is it that I need to change in my life so that I can last longer? Because mortgages, expensive cars, like expensive vacations, all these things are going to require you to have a lot more money than you're going to have when you start.
Yeah.
Being aware that, like, if there is some truth in the fact that it's not the best who succeed, it's the people who last, then how do you structure your life? Some people have more privilege than others. And so it's like, you might not have the same privilege that I had. And so like, you might have to do things that I didn't have to do. And that's just part of it. But there's a resilience to it. Like, if you get up and you keep going, at some point, a door will open. That's why, like, when you look out, right, and you say, like, this guy isn't the best. How is he? It's because he lasted, or she, right? It has nothing to do with their talent. Their talent got them to the conversation. But success beyond that is really just having the opportunity to be there when that door opened. And the only way to be there is not give up. And so it's like, it's a hard thing to say when people have debt and they have families and things like that. I get it. And people do all the time. I didn't, like, I structured my entire life around like making this work. I spent a decade of what many would consider to be, a terrible income.
So one way I look at my values are usually it helps me in decision making, but most importantly in a decision making where I start comparing like my business with other business or my life with others' life. At that point, it helps me. It's like, there's someone else's business or someone else's life is different because they have a different values, and so that's kind of like in the way of comparison, like when you define the goals, personal goals or business goals. I think it helps me a lot in that sense when I check those with my values, and it gives me, as you mentioned about for you, I think it's tool. For me, it's more like a validation. It tells me why I do what I do. Great. So, Rich, next question I wanted to ask you about the work-life balance, because that's kind of like something that I have observed that a lot of people in the WordPress or outside WordPress, just in general, entrepreneurs and high achievers, they struggle a lot to find that balance, because we all want to grow and we also want to make sure that we continue to achieve what we desire for, but also in this process or journey, a lot of us burn out or feel dissatisfied or ask the question about what is the cost to pay for the growth, and that's where the peaceful growth comes into the picture, like how we can kind of find the balance. So that's the question I wanted to ask you, that how do you manage the growth and the efforts that you need to put in order to achieve that, and how do you balance the work and life in this sense?
Oof. Yeah, I always say that I work every moment I can so I can take off anytime I want. And so that means that, like, I'll work on a Sunday, I'll work on a Friday night. To me, there's no off limits to when work can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that will, give me the opportunity to say, I don't want to work Tuesday at all. Right. And so to me, it's that, and this is such a DNA thing. And I think that as part of the journey that people have, they have to really start to listen to their bodies, their physical bodies, their mental bodies, and go with them, not against them. So for me, it was getting healthy. I was a big drinker in my 20s. I gave up drinking at 30. So it's, I'm 43 now. So 13 years without alcohol. I would say that basically was the foundation for my health. Not drinking has allowed me to get great sleep. Without good foundational sleep, I don't know how anyone does anything. And most people don't get good sleep. So, figure these things out and then be disciplined. But be disciplined with regard to how your body tells you it wants to do things. There's no general plan. Eat food that makes you feel good. Remove food that doesn't make you feel good. You know what I mean? If you're super thin and you need more caloric intake, eat as much ice cream as you want, right? Like, there's ways to do things that are going to be contrary to what the general, plans would be, because we're not general, So it's that. It's get your health in line. It's like, it's all of that. And then once you have that, I think you'll have more energy to work, because I think that, the downside to this lifestyle is that it's not a 9 to 5. And those that make it a 9 to 5 are the outliers. I mean, like, I look at them and I'm like, this is incredible that you've done that. It's not going to happen for me. And even if I could do it, this has become my hobby in addition to my business. And so I'm not going out and spending a couple hours a week mountain biking, like, maybe that would somebody, or I don't, golf. It's like, this is what draws my attention, So I don't really know that I would say that I have good work-life balance, but I would say that I'm happy. And I don't regret the time that I spend on work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I have the ability, if that were to change, to implement something different in my life. But, all the things that I think are obvious, like everyone should have a therapist and speak to them as often as possible. The therapist that I speak to every other week, and almost always it's business stuff. And she's not a business therapist. It's just what comes up, what's in my head all the time. And so we talk about that a lot. It's nice having someone to talk to who doesn't care, who doesn't have any ulterior motives. It's just that. It's like, if you're, if you can go to the gym, it's just all these things that are like, they're obvious to me now, but they weren't 20 years ago. And then, as best as possible, be disciplined. I feel like most entrepreneurs that are not wantrepreneurs, any entrepreneur that's made it to a point where they're like, this is working. Like, I believe in myself. I'm not just, going through the motions. It's actually work. I think there's a requirement there of discipline. But I think I can say, remember to be disciplined, because, like, I'm the type of person who, either my apartment is spotless or it's like a bomb went off. Either I am like, up at 4:30, gym, eating 3-4 times a day, or like, you know what I mean? It's all over the place. And so it's like, just remembering to just say, hey, get back on track, be disciplined. You have the ability to do this and do it. And then, forgive yourself when you cheat, or when you you have a bad week.
Yeah.
But always just try to draw yourself back. For me, it's Sunday. It's like Sunday is prep day, clean the apartment, laundry, prep the week, get everything together in bed as early as I possibly can, and give myself the opportunity to have that really disciplined week, right? But yeah, and I'm single, right? I think that, I don't want to set it, but like my life is very, very different than most people's lives. Like everyone in my networking has families, has children. I don't. And I have to remind myself that like the ability for me to do a lot of these things has to do with that fact.
Yeah.
So the other thing I would say is like with work-life balance is like, don't listen to me if you don't have the same type of lifestyle. Find somebody who has a similar lifestyle outside of work and listen to them, or ask them, how do you do it? Because finding people who are similar in that sense is probably really, really important.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That it's very important to find out the people who have the similar environment and the similar set of data set, before you compare what is right or wrong or what is good or best for you.
Yeah.
All right. So I have a couple short and quick questions. It's more like a lightning round, So the one is, what's your biggest new learning in 2023 till date?
Yeah, like the difference between how I do something and somebody else does something, no one notices but me. So like again, like the diminishing returns, and it's just give people more opportunity to take things off my plate, and then react to the success of that based on the client, not how I would have done it. Right? Because like every now and again I have to take off, things get done. I wouldn't have done it that way. Turns out it was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love it. Do you listen to other podcasts, that you maybe recommend to other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I got a friend of mine, Brian Castle, has a podcast called Bootstrap Web. That's a fun one if you're into software type stuff. Startups for the Rest of Us. Rob Walling, his podcast is great.
What's the second one?
Startups for the Rest of Us.
Okay, Startups for the Rest of Us. Yeah, we'll put all this into show notes as well. But yeah, I think it would be cool to mention some of the podcasts that entrepreneurs like you and me listen to.
Yeah, those are the two that I listen to most. But to be honest with you, I haven't listened to many in a while. I go through phases with that type of stuff.
Yeah. Great. So Rich, I think we are getting close to wrapping this up. Is there anything else that you would like to mention before we finally wrap it up?
No, that's good.
Yeah, great. I have one last question, and then we will bring this to the home. That I always ask all my guests that who should I interview next from your that that will be a good fit for this podcast as a guest.
I think Brian Castle would be good.
Yeah.
He's got a product called Clarity Flow, software coaches, and he's the co-host of Bootstrap Web.
Oh, nice. Great. Awesome. Yeah, I would love to have him, and we'll reach out to him and see if we can work out something together.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Awesome. And the last thing is, Rich, how people can find you online and learn more about what you do and your business does.
Oh, I'm so bad online. My handle on Twitter is Rich Staats. My last name is Staats. You can catch me there, or you could just drop a note from the website Secret Stache. Stache spelled like a mustache. We didn't mention that in the beginning. STACAP. Yeah, but those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Rich. It was really fun talking to you, and I think there are a lot of things that we touched upon, like values and some of the entrepreneurship journey, and most importantly, that how we all kind of like look into the perspective of work-life balance and some of those importance on that. So thank you for sharing all your insights and experience, and it was really fun having you here on this episode.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Okay guys, so thank you for watching. Now if you are interested and would like to try this out for yourself, we offer a 30-day free trial of our Pro plan where you can test all the Multicollab features. So for this, all you have to do is click on the link in the description below, and this will bring you to this page, and under the Pro heading, simply click on this button here. Now simply enter a few details and that's it. You're ready to enjoy the Pro version of Multicollab for free for 30 days. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.